Welcome to Executives at the Edge, the podcast from Amplify. Each episode features insights from the top network, cloud, and technology executives, giving you key takeaways to help you grow your revenue and bring solutions to market faster. I'm your host, Pascal Menezes. Join me as we explore thought-provoking perspectives from the leaders and changemakers propelling the AI-powered digital economy forward. Well, I'm really super excited to have Ben Edmonds. He's the founder and CEO of Connectbase. And today we're going to cover some very fascinating topics, things that people don't ever think about. And that is, how do you connect a business networks together and get it right? And it starts with what we call address location truth. And you might think that's a simple thing because the postal system uses it. But what we fascinated to understand is that the complexities in telecommunications is very, very different. So with that, I am really pleased to have Ben Edmonds. Ben, for our listeners, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and Connectbase?
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Pascal. It's an honor to be here with one of the thought leaders out there in the industry. And a little bit of background about me. I'm the CEO and founder of Connectbase. I've been operating in this connectivity space for the last 3 decades, starting from MCI back in the 90s through today. Connectbase is a platform purpose-built for our industry that helps solve some really hard problems out there for service providers around what we call location truth, connecting the ecosystem in a fabric of APIs tied together in our platform, and helping people reduce friction in the buying and selling process globally.
So Ben, you've been like a rocket ship, your company, Connectbase. Obviously, you're doing something right. And tell us what exactly motivated you to found Connectbase, and what is exactly the challenge that the industry is facing that's made your platform so popular?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think there's a couple things that stand out, and it all starts with empathy from provider's point of view. I sat in the chair that our customers are sitting in, trying to figure out how to navigate this complex web of providers to deliver what you need to deliver. From my experiences at MCI, Expedius, FiberLight, and Global Capacity, I learned a lot about the buying and selling motion, the reality that there's over 11,000 physical operators that own infrastructure in the ground, and it takes an ecosystem to deliver the services that make our digital world work. No one has enough capital to do everything on their own. They have to work together, and those working together, frictions that have existed for a long time motivated me to want to go solve them. For the ecosystem, I learned about order fallout, from a technology that I'm not a huge fan of, DSL. The DSL qualification process, a decade ago and 2 decades ago was hit or miss. So people would think they'd get in one thing and they get another thing. And that left an experience for the buyer, for the seller, that was less than favorable. Or the realities of constructing big fiber for hyperscalers or data centers or enterprise or carriers. And you get to an aerial build or an underground build, and you got rigorous, impediments in your way to get that fiber built, whether it's make ready on a pole or, you got to cross a railroad track to get to your end destination. These things are frictions and realities in our market. But they all get better when you have clarity. And I wanted to solve that clarity to reduce the friction so people could go buy, sell more.
And I think what's really interesting is for our listeners, they might get confused. We have the internet, you just plug in, you can go anywhere, right? So yeah. It's just, and it's considered best effort, meaning you send it and you pray for it, or we call it, I can't remember what it's called. Send and pray.
Spray and pray.
But basically, spray and pray. Okay. But basically, we've all been using the internet and for consumer applications and consumer things that works fine. But for business applications that are mission critical, they don't really use the internet. What they use is this business network. And the business network is basically a local loop, a connection from some point through a whole business network, backbones, and then connects to another point in the world and other points, and they connect their offices and buildings, and those are called a business network. So in essence, what you're solving is those connection points, and you have to stitch them together between all the different operators and make that network look like one for an enterprise that buys it, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it spot on. And if you're a service provider, you got to do the stitching for who you want to win, or you got to play a role working with the service provider that's going to own the contract for the enterprise demand. But that multi-location geography reality in a very capital intensive world creates all this, friction and uncertainty, historically.
So a company like Acme, I'll
Yep.
just use Acme as a generic name, comes to service provider X and says, "Hey, I want these locations at these kind of bandwidths, and these services carry Ethernet, IP, wavelengths." And they basically say to service provider X, "Hey, I've got these locations in Singapore and Canada and Europe and South America and all over the world." Of course, you know, service provider X does not have all those assets to every last mile, to every building, to every
Exactly.
location. So service provider X now has to go out and go to all the various providers of these locations who has access, and could be, tens of providers depending on how many connections they want. And then service provider X has to stitch it all together, make it all work, and look like one big network that's business grade quality to Acme, the enterprise customer. Now, that's the scenario, correct?
Yeah, that's a scenario. And it started out, it starts with the reality that that one provider can never own assets everywhere. It's literally impossible given geography and the size and scope of the world. And then you combine that with, just the historic culture and norms in our industry that it wasn't super transparent and it didn't have good data. So you couple those three things together and it creates a lot of manual processes and back and forth and swivel chair to stitch things together historically.
And so normally the challenge was that service provider X that was providing a service to Acme, the enterprise customer, could take 6 months to figure out all of this stuff. And that's unheard of in today's reality. But what you solved is a very, very unique solution. I mean, it's not the full journey of everything coming up right
Yeah,
away, but let's just start. Number one is what no one thinks about is, okay, I've got all these connections on the world, but how do I know? How do I know what those locations are? And so that you call that location truth. Can you help our
that's right.
listeners understand there's a little nuance here that is not well understood? And I think this was your entry point that you solved was,
It
how do I make the location accurate to everybody? And everything, okay, I can use GPS. And can you explain why GPS is not enough? And can you help us with this? Just start with this nuance.
Yeah, no, and it's a really important starting point, I believe, because ultimately, if you get location right, you can get your discovery or serviceability right. You can understand the products right. You can get your quotation right. You can get your order without rework or multiple truck rolls right. You can get your billing and inventory right. Like it sets the table. And our approach to it was, hey, let's not just go to Google or Precisely or Esri and do what everyone else has done and use, a third party like that. What we wanted to do is get to a 911 structural level of, integrity where we knew with precision where something was and ID'd it and then connected into a set of ways to speak ecosystem and translate the inputs and outputs across the ecosystem, regardless of what somebody comes to the table with. And I'll use North Dakota as a good example of just a U.S. Challenging set of rural addresses that sometimes come in different ways. And there's one address that I use in some of the presentations that has 31 different entry points from service providers and people partners that are coming in and typing it different ways, different structures. And the reality is one structure. So what we've done is spatially gridded out the world. So if you think about a grid system, Google's done it. What Three Words has done it. But we took it a step further and we've conformed the grid to structures, right of way, and property boundaries. And given those things singular attributes of we call it a global location ID, but essentially tokenized structures. So if you're a building in North Dakota at a particular site, we have a token representation of where that is spatially in a construct to go and interpret and translate different inputs to get to that same singular ID to always know that that's the location we're talking about. And so we've built a set of services to understand how to speak different languages of location. You might, I'll use a simple analogy, 123 Main Street might get spelled out and in full, or sometimes it might be 123 main ST period. And all these things sound simple, but when you're transacting in millions and you're having systems talk to systems, matching and getting those things connected at a structural level gives you the integrity and trust to get a fully automated experience. And if you are speaking different languages, just like if you and I was speaking Spanish and you were speaking English, we wouldn't talk together in a way that connected. And location works the same way. If you're speaking different ways, especially across APIs, you have this fallout. And we've built this spatial structural ID system that allows us to tokenize and connect, and the set of services to interpret traditional inputs, even if they're varied and complex, and translate it back into that location ID every single time, and come back with a 911 like of an experience from an accuracy instead of a consumer app like experience, if that makes sense. And it's important to do it from a structural perspective because connectivity goes everywhere, not just where the postal system delivers mail. So if you look at a US, which is a fairly mature and good market, it's still only about 79% of structures in the United States get a mail USPS delivered. You got things out there like distribution centers and data centers and towers that don't have mail delivered to every single spot at the address that's represented it, or campus environments or airport authorities with lots of different buildings and structures. So understanding things from a structural view is really how connectivity is built, and we do that on a global scale today, crossed over 2.2 billion locations.
So why is it that? So it's a very good point. The postal system worldwide has learned to ship mail to anywhere in the world, but that is not good enough for what we're talking about in connectivity. And I think you made that point. But lat long, we've been using it. It is the token representation of, I think it's 3 by 3 feet or 3 by 3 meters. I can't remember.
3 by 3 meters.
That is, 3 by 3 meters that represents every part of the planet that I can pinpoint a location. So why is it lat long not good enough for location truth?
It really breaks down to the people using different interpretations of how the lat long gets created, and then the preciseness of the lat long. If you're, doing 5 digits versus 6 digits versus 7 digits, you're going to get a different level of precision in it. But in the processing of translating the input, i.e. an address on 123 Main Street, to get to that coordinate, you may fall in one side of the building or another side of the building. And if you're just using GPS coordinates or lat longs and trying to match that at a precise level, you basically have to have perfection of speaking exact the same way. By using a spatial representation of the structure and then catching the interpretations, whether it's coming in lat long or coming in an address, we're able to translate into the ID token and create a bigger reality, because I'm at 134 Flanders right now. If I just took a 3 by 3 meter view, I'd have over 37 different points in this one building alone. And you think about much bigger buildings out there like the Pentagon or 111 8th in New York City, you just have all this variation and it creates, fallout. Even if you know the same answer on both sides, but you're using those slight variations, you miss the opportunity to connect. And the challenges, well, some people have thought about, well, I'll just generalize. I'll take the first set and match around that. Well, then you start getting into less precise descriptions. And in places like London or Singapore or New York City, where the buildings are right next to each other, you wind up in a very different place very easily. So it gets to be a real challenge of managing the matching process when you're using GPS tracks alone, as well as the different interpretations of how to get there in the first place are still a reality in the market.
So you've solved that. And GPS alone is more two-dimensional, right? It doesn't, if I have a
It
big
is.
building, it doesn't tell me the where in the building, what floors and all that. And I think what you're saying is if it's a very big building, and when you say fallout, what you're saying is if I say as to one operator, you have this location and here's my GPS, and the other operator goes, oh, I don't know that GPS because it's a very big building and you've given me just one spot in that building, but I'm looking at another spot is where my service is in the building. So then that is, nope, I don't have the service. That's what you call fallout, right?
Exactly right. And there's fallout in a couple different stages in the discovery phase that you're referencing now. And I think that's probably the most important phase. So there's order fallout as well. But just sticking on this first phase, one of the hidden costs that most people in the provider space don't recognize is the missed opportunities from fallout, where they're giving an answer saying, I don't know, or no, I don't have something, when they actually do, in a way that they could go solve for that. We've helped the industry in a couple different ways. One with building location truth at a precise basis. We've also created this spatially aware proximity. So when a query comes in, and say it's 482 feet from your fiber network as fiber's actually built, and you have a capital structure that allows you to go build that, knowing the world's not fully built out yet, you can still respond in the processes that we've built and say, hey, this is not connected to near net. There's a construction, there's an interval process, but here's the economics and here's my product capabilities to do that. Before us, there was a lot of here's my on-net buildings only, and they still mismatched the on-net buildings, but they missed that whole spatially aware and relied on manual processes to go do truck rolls. Can I get there and how long is it going to take? We've built that spatially so it happens in near real time, literally in seconds.
Yeah, and I think so that was the fundamental technology that you used to differentiate and
Yep.
solve a real massive problem. And then you did more than that. Now the biggest thing is you automated the first process of anything in automation, which is give me a quote, right?
Yep.
I go to buy something, I say, give me what's the price, right? And I'm saying I want a car and this kind of vehicle and this dealer, this model type, what's the price, right? With all the features, right? So telecom providers do the same thing. They go to another location, says, hey, I want this kind of features, the speeds, blah, blah, blah. What kind of services, give me the price. And you actually have solved not only the location, but you brought together a marketplace where providers can come together and ask for that price, correct?
Yeah, no, it's a great way of putting our next step. We call it a federated ecosystem. So what we've done is enable the sellers, the suppliers out there, whether it's an AT&T, Comcast, any of the network operators that sell connectivity for a living, to maintain their brand, their controls, their reality of how they serve the market up and down the scope of size of the business, and connected them in a fabric where it allows them to maintain a one-for-one relationship with channel partners and wholesale buyers on the other side. So those wholesale partners and the wholesale buyers and the channel partners can query and get a specific response from. It's not a generic response where everyone sees the same thing. If you have a special relationship, you get a special answer. If you have a regular relationship, you get, but it's controlled by the parties that are involved. And we just act as a tech platform that reduces the friction and how that happens, if that makes sense. But it's, you take that first step, the serviceability discovery, you add on the ability to have a digital product catalog that speaks ecosystem as well, just like location. Because, if you look across the providers, and this, Pascal, with all the work you guys have done with standardizing the product, there's a branding aspect that every provider tries to go through. But ultimately, if you want an Ethernet service, you need to be able to query for that Ethernet service the way you want it. And we've tried to put those wrappers around it to make it easily consumed, whether it's dark fiber, wavelengths, Ethernet, broadband, but it's the provider's payload response. And then it goes all the way, to your point, to the quote, and then shows up on the other side with, here's what's available, how much it's going to cost, for what terms and attributes, attributes like the SLA, the delivery interval, other things that are important as part of the buying experience or the partnering experience.
Yeah, so well put, but you're not in the way. You're not the one that data transfers through the Connect base to the other provider. You're more about, they already have those connections in place, correct? But to stitch them, it normally would take months and months and months, right? So everybody has connections all over the world, but they don't have connection to each other all over the place. So, but they're connected in some way, but they have to manually stitch them together and make a connection
Exactly.
for end to end, right?
Yeah, and
we're
taking the friction.
But
Exactly.
you're the automation of that.
Exactly.
You're the automating part of that's already in place. But let me stitch A, B, and C, and D, and E, and F to create this A to Z kind of circuit. And what you've done is you provide that automation of that.
That's right. So we don't act as a service provider or a channel agent, but we act as a automation mechanism, bringing those parties together so they can have the commercial relationship they have already established, but not swivel chair with emails and different portals, but do it in one flow.
And that's the answer, right? In the past, it was all done by emails and swivel chairs and proprietary APIs. Depending who you talk to, it'd be a nightmare. And it could take you months and months and months for someone to come back to the enterprise and say, okay, I got you a quote. Okay, and that's just a quote. That's not even placing the order yet. Okay, and that's where they agree that they want to do.
And then it falls out. There's another fallout stage to what we were talking about earlier. You take all that time and energy to get a quote, and we shrink that down to make it, happen in seconds or minutes. But then you place an order, and this is where the industry needs to continue to mature. But on average, there's over 20% of the orders placed in this ecosystem fall out with either rework or they just can't be fulfilled. And imagine, going to a car dealer and buying a car and spending a couple hours filling out all the paperwork, picking out the one you wanted, and you walk out the door after buying the car and they say, just kidding, I can't actually deliver what you just said you bought and signed all the paperwork for. You got to go to another dealer somewhere else. Or Amazon not actually spinning up the storage resources or the cloud compute when you click the button 20% of the time. Like that experience is a pretty painful experience that this industry gets associated with. And part of it is having that location insight to know with certainty that you have the ability to deliver, or your partner has the ability to deliver, and setting appropriate expectation around that up front with a more, degree of accuracy, if you would. And that's part of our mission to shine a light on that to mitigate the fallout.
So it's not just the coding process. You're saying even in the ordering process, after I order, I want to make sure, you want to make sure you mitigate that. No, just joking. Can't really order that. And that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, because think about the underlying reality of how we got there over the last couple of decades, where providers would take a what I would call a peanut butter spread approach to pricing and saying, hey, in this zip code or in this city, I'm going to deliver a price for X, and they advertise that on an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF file that they send out to their sales teams, to their partners, to their customers, and say, this is what I can do. Well, the reality is, for lots of people, they don't actually have connectivity to every single one of those locations. They have connectivity throughout some of it, but there's construction, and sometimes that construction is farther away, have impediments in front of it. And just the realities of the market. So when you're pricing in an aggregate view, you have a lot of risk in execution. If you price and understand at a location level what you can and can't do, you get better expectations and you participate with real deals, with real economics in the right way that allows you to go, frankly, end to end in an automated flow.
So basically, your platform has buyers and sellers of telecom providers worldwide coming to
Yep.
you to basically get at least a quote from a price. So from one
You got
location,
it.
get me a quote for a service. But then also you have order, right? You add order to that platform,
We do,
right?
and we can be transparent. Like we're open, so we can send an order to TransUnion, to Amdocs, to Salesforce, to Pick a Path. Homegrown systems out there if they're still on that, or we can carry the order through and place it internally.
It's perfect. And you're growing leaps and bounds, and I know we're coming to our end of our session, but very interesting. I think many folks take for granted that these networks are connected, and they just think, well, they're a piece of fiber, just join them together. It doesn't
Yeah,
work that simple.
and people
It
like
was that simple.
DKIX and the internet peering space, or Equinix and the data center space, have done wonders for how the physical reality or logical networks get connected. But there's still a reality of commercial doing business together that has been broken for a long time, and that's really what we've been trying to solve for the last 10 years since I quit my job and started this, and I've raised $80 million in the fight to go build something better.
Yeah, no, my hat's off to you, Ben, because you were a one-man show. I think you funded yourself and
Yeah,
built this great company you have now,
appreciate
just
it.
with one, a truly entrepreneurial spirit of, I see this challenge in the industry. I got to wake up every morning, figure this out, and meet from one become, the great company you are. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage and determination and insight and wisdom and so on. So hats off to you, Ben. Congratulations. Connectbase certainly is a big success. And
Thank you.
we look forward to continue working with you. And I want to thank you for this episode. I think it's been a very fascinating episode.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm a big supporter of you and the organization as a whole. I believe to my core in it, and I look forward to continuing to partner and be a active participant.
Thank you for listening to Executives at the Edge, brought to you by Amplify. Be sure to follow, share, and leave a review. Catch every episode on your favorite platform or visit us at amplify.net.